Another week in lockdown. This is Cotswold District Council Live. Good afternoon and welcome to Cotswold District Council Live. My name is Councillor Joe Harris and I'm the leader of Cotswold District Council. Welcome here to the Barn Theatre in Cirencester. I'm joined today by Councillor Andrew Doherty, who is Cotswold District Council's Cabinet Member for Waste and Recycling. I'm also joined by the star of BBC Three's This Country, Paul Cooper, who you may know plays a character called Martin Mucklow, a local of these parts. So once again, a big thank you to the Barn Theatre for hosting us here today. Fantastic asset here in the centre of Cirencester, and they've really transformed their operation from conducting shows to shows like this. So we haven't got people here in the Barn Theatre, but we are able to talk to you and present to you from the comfort of your very own home, you lucky, lucky people. So we're going to be with you today for about half an hour, and even perhaps 45 minutes, depending on how we get on. We're going to have an update on the bins. We're going to be joined by Councillor Paul Hodgkinson, who is going to join us via video link. He's the councillor for Bourton-on-the-Water and Northleach on Gloucestershire County Council, and he'll unpack a little bit about what the County Council do as opposed to the District Council. We'll have an interview with Paul Cooper about this country and the impact that's had on his life, but also about how he's found lockdown. He's lived here for a long time now, haven't you, Paul?
Yes, 33 years.
Only 33 years, yeah. Marvellous. So we'll have a bit of a discussion about that. And then as we go on, we'll be making note of your questions that you ask during the broadcast. So get those to us. So as I said, we're going to start with business. We're going to go over to Andy Doherty on my left-hand side, and he's going to give us a bit of an update on the bins. Andy.
Okay, few things to talk about this week in terms of what's going on with the bins. So most notable thing since we were last giving an update is that the garden waste service has launched again, and we're now collecting huge volumes of garden waste. So I think in the first week we were on to about 300 tonnes of waste we picked up, which is more than we picked up with pretty much anything else. The recycling is running about the same as it has done for a while now, about 20% more than we're normally picking up, and that's fairly stable over time. Food is still continuing to go up, which is surprising to us because we're not sure where it's all going. But at the minute we're picking up food, and that's still gradually trending up week on week in terms of the amount we're collecting from you per household. And one of the side effects of that is, again, trying to fit everything into the vehicles. So one of the things some of you may have noticed is that we're not always able to pick up all the paper. So at the minute we've got a temporary arrangement, so it's quite often where we're coming to pick up your paper the following day rather than on the day it was originally scheduled, and there's different crews and different vehicles coming to do that. And over the next couple of weeks we're going to be making some more changes to the vehicles and the service so we can try and get all the paper on at the same time we're doing the main collections and pick up absolutely everything in one go. We've not had too many problems with the garden waste service in terms of missing things. Obviously, all of you have been trying to get as much as you can into the bins. They've generally been okay. We've had a few that have been so heavy we literally can't get them on the lorry, but not too much of that. But one thing to bear in mind with the garden waste service is we're only able to take the bins that you put out that are our green bins as provided to you and have got stickers for 1920 on them already. So we're not picking up from older containers that don't have stickers on them. We can't take side waste, we can't take other bags you might put out. And that's simply to make sure that we get up as much of the material that's out as possible. We get it on the lorries in a predictable way, and we don't leave too much behind. If we started picking up everything that you could put out, we'd literally have no space on the lorries, and we wouldn't be able to get everything on. So bear with us while we do that and try and stagger and stage the material that you've got out over time. If you've got it in the bin, we'll take it, it'll be gone, reuse that bin, pack it well, neatly, not too heavy, ready for the next collection, and then just keep going on at that until we've caught up with whatever you've got out. And as we do that, that makes it easier to run, less chance of things going wrong with the service. And that's probably the main things that are going on in the minute. Few hiccups still while we've got higher volumes, but we've got ways of picking those up and catching up on ourselves where we miss anything. So bear with us while we still work through this most recent phase of lockdown, whatever we're now calling it.
Andy, thank you very much. We've got a paper coming to our cabinet meeting next week that's around the pricing, because as you know, the price of a permit is due to go up. You've got some news on that. Hopefully, we'll approve it.
Yeah, so the provisional price for this year for the 2021 period was going to be £35, so it's gradually going up in stages over time so that we get closer to the £45 a year, which is what it actually costs us. People seem surprised when I'm not encouraging people to sign up for the garden waste service, but that's on the simple basis we actually lose money on each licence we sell rather than making money. So what we've agreed off the back of the consultation we did with you a few months ago is that that price will gradually rise over time till it reflects what the service actually costs to run. For this year it was going to be £35. Because we've had the 2 months effectively where we haven't had service, that's had a fiver knocked off, and it will be £30 again for the shortened year for this year. And then in next year we'll be increasing the prices again to get closer to that real price that it's actually costing us to pick it up and take it away.
Great, good news. We've got a couple of questions trickling in, so we'll take a couple now that are specific to waste, Andy. Joanne Linehan, sorry. Where do you get the stickers from? Where do you get a licence if you need a licence?
Okay, so we are just in the process of finalising the letter that's going to go out to existing customers, and that will give you the details of where to go and register. We basically encourage everyone to register online, so there's a web page link you can follow through off of the website. At the minute, that won't let you do anything. At the beginning of June, that will start to go live, and then we'll be accepting people renewing the licences. We do the licence renewals, and then we post you out a new licence, you stick it on the bin, you're good to go basically up until 31st of March 2021 at that point.
Great. We've also got a question from Katrina Ross. When do licences need to be reviewed?
Renewed.
Renewed. So at
the minute we're carrying on collecting up until the end of June. So we've extended the original 31st of March 2020 date out to the 30th of June. That is the last day in June, isn't it? 30th of June 2020. So it's additional 3 months on top. So you don't need to worry about having one until the end of June. But our aim will be to get them all out by the second, third week of June.
Great. Simone Clark, when are you delivering new garden waste bins for new licences?
Okay, so if you're getting a new licence, we've gone through and we've looked at all the people who've already asked about having a new licence who aren't existing customers. And I think so for about 14 of every 15 of them have already got a green bin. Long ago, before my time, we distributed garden bins out to pretty much everybody in the entire district. So there's a lot of bins lurking around that are being used for other types of storage, or I know they're being used as water butts. There's a farm somewhere with about 6 of them apparently being used. So what we're looking to do is to have all of those come back out if people want additional ones and put license on them before we put new ones out. The other key thing we're going to do is we're going to take it in careful, steady steps, because one thing we don't want to do is run up a lot of new licenses and not then be able to fit everything in the vehicle. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to go slowly on giving out new containers so we can make sure we can collect from all of the containers that were already out there that will now have stickers on them. Once we know what's going on with that, which we'll try and do as quickly as we can, we'll start deciding how and which parts of the district we can let people start to do and buy additional bins and then start to put out more waste maybe than they are currently.
Right, Andy, thank you for that brief update, and keep the questions coming. We are here for the next half an hour to 45 minutes. So keep those questions coming if you've got any that spring to mind, and we will try and answer those. We're joined now by Councillor Paul Hodgkinson, who is the County Councillor for Bourton on the Water and Northleach in the centre of the Cotswolds. Paul, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Great, good to have you on the line, and you're looking very healthy. It must be all of that time in the garden. I know you're a keen gardener, so yeah, good to have you. Good to have you with us. So, Paul, clearly, I lead the district council. Andy's a district councillor, and this show is sort of about the district council. For residents that might not know, or perhaps don't know the ins and outs of the way local government works in our area, what does the county council do?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joe, and nice to be with you this afternoon. So the County Council is primarily responsible for some of that larger stuff like infrastructure. So, for instance, the council is responsible for roads in the county. It's responsible for pavements. It gives subsidies to some buses. It gets involved in modelling for train services, for instance. So those are what you call all the kind of transport, roads and infrastructure. Road safety is included in that. And I know in my area, road safety is always a big issue. You've then got other things like care, so social care. That's caring for older people. And that takes up a massive amount of the county council's budget. And then in addition to that, you've got children in care. Again, it's an area that takes up a lot of the budget. In fact, 70% of the county council's budget is taken up by social care and children in care. In addition to that, you've got what I call smaller things, which are still important, like trading standards. That's the standards by which retailers, etc., and restaurants have to abide by. You've got libraries, for instance, and big planning applications like school applications, and quarries, that sort of thing. And of course, education. So school transport, looking after the schools that are still part of the local authority. Many schools are now academies, so they get their money and instructions direct from the government. But those who don't still kind of report into the county council. I think that's probably most of the key things.
You've done pretty well to remember that, because if somebody asked me to recount everything that the district council does, I'd probably be able to name most of them. But yeah, that sounded pretty comprehensive. So, Paul, let's turn to sort of COVID and life since the lockdown then. Obviously, our officers and our councillors have been working with people at the county council. Tell us a bit about what the county council have done around COVID. Obviously, the Gloucestershire Help Hub that our sort of viewers will be, I'm sure aware of. That's sort of been coordinated by the county council, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think I would start with that actually. So the county council has kind of been the focal point really for coordination and public health. I'll come on to public health in a minute. But in terms of the Community Help Hub, this was the central help hub based at Shire Hall and manned by, resourced by Gloucestershire County Council staff who are redeployed. And this is the point where people from the community go to that central hub and say, look, I want help, or I need help, or I know someone who needs help, my neighbour or friend needs help. Alternatively, it's offers of help. So businesses, neighbours, friends have gone into that hub and offered help. And staggeringly, at the last count, there's almost 9,000 people have contacted the Help Hub since the middle of March. So it's been hugely successful. It's open every day for people to ring or communicate by email. And I think it's a really good thing. Joe, if I could just add to that, my thanks for all the volunteers in the community, actually, because, you know, the Help Hub coordinates things, but it's people on the ground who've made the difference. And in my area, in Bourton-on-the-Water, there's an amazing 130 street volunteers. I know they've featured on your show before. In particular, Amanda, Linda and Donna, who've done such an astonishing job in getting that working. And volunteers in all the other villages like Chedworth, the town of Northleach, you know, these things are frankly superb. So that's a big thing in terms of the community. The other thing I just wanted to mention is public health. So Gloucestershire County Council has a responsibility for public health. Clearly that's key in this pandemic. And so they're now at the forefront of organising testing. That's public testing in terms of testing for COVID-19 for care home staff and care home residents, because clearly that has been a big issue with COVID-19 symptoms and sadly many fatalities in care homes. So I would say the County Council has been doing those two big things. There are obviously other things, but I know you don't want me on the entire show talking.
We'd be delighted to, Paul. You know, we'd be delighted. But yes, we are limited for time. In terms of next steps, then, clearly we're entering a sort of recovery phase now, and you know, you as a county councillor will have some ideas of what you want the county council to be doing as we engage in recovery and trying you know, reboot the local economy and get people moving again. So, what do you want to see in particular from the county council in order to sort of help with the recovery?
Well, I think one thing from this will help the recovery in terms of economy and health is the promotion of other means of transport other than cars. So one of the delightful things about lockdown, and many people have found the joys of walking again. I've got my cycle out of the garage. I've been cycling up and down the A435, and it's been good because there's been less traffic. But as the traffic increases, we need to make sure that some of our roads and pavements are sufficiently good and safe for people who are cycling and walking. So at the moment, the County Council has asked each of the districts to look at areas in their district, such as Bolton, for instance, again, where there could be changes to some of the roads to make sure that their social distancing is maximised, that people can get into the centre of a village like Bolton safely with social distancing. So there's a real benefit for public health in maybe things like pedestrianisation temporarily, but also stimulating local businesses at the same time to make sure that people feel safe enough to go into the centres of towns and villages. So I really would like to see Gloucestershire County Council doing something on that. I think they're starting to make steps on it. In terms of the wider economy, I suppose it is making sure that there is a real plan there, not only for retail, but also getting some of our industries back up and running again, because it is going to be a long haul, I think, I fear, and we need to give people confidence to get back out there and start spending money.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you. If you're happy to, if you can stay on the line, and what we'll do,
Sure.
we'll, as we get questions in, we'll put any that sort of to do with the County Council to yourself. And it might be that you've got a question for our very special guest of the week, who we're going to go to now. So I'm thrilled to say we are joined by Paul Cooper. So for those of you who don't know, or perhaps have had your head in your garden waste bin for the past couple of years, a very successful comedy on BBC Three called This Country has taken off. Paul, tell us about This Country, and then we'll talk about you.
Yeah, This Country, I mean, it's been a roller coaster. It was an overnight success in that it took 8 years, actually, from Daisy sitting with this camera in our front room, doing a 2-minute YouTube clip to actually getting the Series 1 off the ground. So it's had three series and a special, and has won 4 BAFTAs. So
Wow.
Incredible, really. Just you pinch yourself every day. It's extraordinary.
I bet. So it is very much a family affair. You mentioned Daisy, didn't you? So Daisy's your daughter, and obviously your son Charlie is also another star of the show. So it's a family affair. So what's that dynamic like?
Well, it's actually, for the kids to write it, it's easy because you can tell your brother or sister anything. Whereas if it's a friend or someone else, you've got to kind of tiptoe around. So I think they actually found that dynamic really easy. And they just tell it how it is, there's kind of no holes barred. I mean, we get lots of, telephone conversations in the evening. Oh, Charlie was horrible, and Daisy was, and this was difficult. Oh, it was a dreadful day. But they thrash it out, and I think that saves a lot of time, having to not to be polite to each other.
Absolutely. And it's set in Northleach. I don't think it's ever given the name Northleach in the programme, does it? And you play a character called Martin Mucklow, don't you? Tell us a bit about Martin, because he's a bit of a controversial character, to say the least.
Yeah, he's horrible, and particularly horrible to Kerry, his daughter, and that's kind of reflected when I'm outside, actually, because no one ever comes up to me because they think I'm so. Actually, it was brilliant. In Cheltenham, before kind of obviously lockdown and whatever, I went there with Charlie. We did our separate bit of shopping, and we met back, and he said, this chap came up to me and asked for a selfie, and then he said, I saw that Martin Mucklow earlier, and I wasn't going to ask that for a selfie. Horrible, nasty bloke. So I think so. That's the kind of normal reaction we've had. But yeah, he's horrible. But it's what a wonderful part to play.
Yeah.
It's great to be a kind of villain. I think I was in something. I'm in the 10 top most villains or something on TV. I'm up there with someone from the Bonds, I think. So yeah, great, love it.
I tell you what, that's an accolade, isn't it? that is quite something. So be honest, how much of the real you is there in the character?
kind of more and more.
Oh God, really?
Continues. No, it's not, but it's not at all. I mean, I'm completely kind of different from him, but it's kind of nice to be kind of playing a baddie, you know. It's kind of nice just to, and sometimes the people look at you and think, are you really like that in real life? Because a lot of people, I mean, I had, tattoos put on for the part,
Status quo
tattoo
that's
in Swindon Town and stuff.
Fantastic.
And they had a poll, and 86% thought that the tattoos were real. So I think that I must look a bit like a villain anyhow. You know, I think that's...
It's amazing, isn't it? I've followed you on social media for quite a while now, and what's quite interesting, and I know that you've got quite a following yourself, haven't you? You've got lots of very committed fans, haven't you? What's that like? It must be weird. Like...
It is strange. I mean, and they turn up for everything. You know, I mean, quite incredible. We played a charity football match last summer against Sirentown Veterans, this country team. We had about 1,200 people turn up. You know,
that's more than an average attendance at a Sirentown home game, isn't it?
Like... someone from Holland and Scotland, and they travelled down, and just extraordinary. It's really been a real cult following. You know, people seem to really identify with it, and I think that kind of mixture of the humour, but also the kind of the social awareness and just the, you know, it's quite, a lot of it is quite sad as well.
It must be strange though, you know, because, you know, I know you're down to earth guy, you know, you live here in Cirencester, don't you? You know, you're in your kitchen doing your washing up, knowing you've got these fans. It must be bizarre. I mean, I really like. It's sort of, you know, I'm relatively well known locally as a sort of, you know, local politician. You know, most people hold me utter disdain, but like, no, that's very unkind. No, most of them are very lovely. As we've seen doing these lives, everyone's been very lovely. But yeah, I mean, just bizarre, weird experience. So. You get recognised a lot, then, I presume, these days.
No, not really.
No, what?
And I'm very, very, very rarely kind of stopped, you know, kind of locally. But sometimes, you know, when I'm out on, you know, just out. I mean, the other day, well, a few months back, you know, the young lady doing the barrier, you know, stopped me at Paddington. Martin Mucklow. She was, you know, dressed in kind of Muslim, you know, head stuff, and she, you know, so I think it's really for a young Muslim girl in London, if she gets it as well, it's got a kind of wide appeal, you know.
Fantastic. It's just amazing. So, Paul, you mentioned you lived here for 33 years, and you know, one of the things we really try to do on this is really celebrate what's great about the area, and clearly a lot of that's borne out, you know, in this country. But equally, why do you live here? You know, for all of us, they're probably a lot. You know, certainly for me, a lot cheaper places to live. There are, you know, more linked up. You know, more things to do. Why do you choose to live here? How did you end up here?
Quite simple. I'm originally from Bideford in North Devon, but I moved up to Berkshire in 1971, and I was working for electronics company as a field sales engineer in Berkshire and Wiltshire. Sorry, Berkshire and Hampshire. Can you remember where it was? And they wanted to change me to look after the Southwest and South Wales. It's a hell of a territory. So I started kind of to commute for about a year doing it, and thought, well, you know, it's cheaper in the Southwest. It's kind of time. And Daisy was 4 weeks old. It's time for a move. And the place that I loved, and I would always kind of pass through, you know, going up to kind of Stonehouse or Stroud or up, you know, up to the M5 or whatever, was Cirencester, and I just fell in love with it. And I kind of stop here, and you go into Tesco's or whatever and have a sandwich. I could not believe how friendly people were. You know, that was the test, going into kind of Tesco's. And Berkshire, I was very different. You know, I lived in a village near Reading, and I didn't enjoy it that much, and the difference coming to Gloucestershire and Cirencester was extraordinary, you know. And the kids have been, you know, to bring up kids, it is the best place. There's nowhere better in the whole country. It's as good as it gets, and the kids have loved it. And I think that's why they've grown, you know, in terms of their, you know, their personalities and their talents, living here, going to school at Powell's, Deer Park, which they really enjoyed, they just loved it. Charlie played football at Siren Town Juniors for 13 years, from under fives to under 18s. Daisy did drama here, so it's just a brilliant place.
Fantastic. I was the same. I went to Powell's, I went to Deer Park, and it's sort of, I think, clearly, I can only speak for Cirencester on the whole, but it's just such a supportive community as well. Certainly in the role that I'm doing now, leader of the district council, on the whole, people are really friendly. They understand, you've got to make tough decisions. In my case, and yeah, we're so lucky, aren't we? And I think particularly during COVID, we've seen that, with everybody mucking in. Paul mentioned the volunteers, didn't he? Up in Bourton on the Water and in all of our communities, people do care, don't they? It's sort of
it's
a bit of a cliche, but
yeah, and that's really why this country got written. Charlie, after he left kind of school, all his friends moved, and went to London or wherever. And Daisy was up at RADA and for 3 years and hated it. Was really hated it. And Charlie went to Exeter University for a couple of years, and it didn't quite work out, and he left. So he went. We said, and I'd lost my job by this time in electronics, and I'm now living in a two-bed rented place on a Chesterton estate, and so we were having kind of tough times, no money, and we said to Charlie, we'd like Daisy to kind of see this through. Could you go up and stay with her, sleep on the floor? And they had no money or whatever, and it was all a bit kind of big and weird for them. And they just started kind of talking about characters and about things back at home, and it really kind of developed from there. So some of those people, we
won't mention any names, but it is quite funny. Like you do see people, you think, I think I might know who that's based on.
Well, the Michael Sleggs, God bless him. That was a kind of part. They used to kind of, Daisy was at Powell's and Deer Park with him. He was in the form above. So characters like that who he kind of played virtually his same character in the show, but it was just a love of, and they loved coming back, and hey presto,
and of course, you mentioned Michael Sleggs, really, an absolutely fantastic guy. Really tragically passed away last year, wasn't it? After a sort of long battle with illness, and again, I think he I think Michael really embodied, didn't he, what this country was about, and actually the whole. What it's like to be from the area. You might not know him personally, but hi, Mike. He'd always say hello. I always used to see him. Funnily enough, I always used to see him in the pub or up at 17 Black, the nightclub, and he sort of sideline. And we'd have a good old laugh. But yeah, I mean that's sort of. I think particularly living in a rural community, that's what it's all about, isn't it? We're so lucky to have that. So, Paul. We first met properly about last year. I think you came to see me to talk about the charity that you work for. So you work for a charity that deals with individuals that have issues with hoarding. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I've been with them for 4 years. They're actually a community interest company. They're based in Berkshire, but I look after Gloucestershire and kind of southwest, mainly kind of Bristol, Bath. So it's working in people's houses, who have hoarding behaviours. It's just a fascinating job, It's and we have support groups. We have 3 support groups in Berkshire, but we've also helped Swindon Borough Council to start a support group in Swindon, and they only had 2 support groups before kind of lockdown, but. It's just fascinating. People you meet, again, are just, talking about a series or a book there. I mean, it's just the people are just incredible and, very interesting people. And it's a big growing problem. And I think, after this lockdown, it's going to be more. It affects 6% of the population. So we're talking about 45,000 people in Gloucestershire, statistically. And we're talking about, being full to the rafters, so that they're not sleeping in their beds. People aren't having a bath or whatever, because it's filled up with stuff. So it's been now recognised by the World Health Organization back in April 2018, and the NHS take their lead. So, now we're starting to kind of, but it's the trouble is I've been on the kind of phone. Obviously, I can't go in, and I've been phoning a lot of my kind of clients, and they kind of said, "Told you."
Yeah, no.
And a lot of those people are isolated, and when everyone was scrambling for toilet rolls, they had a few dozens. So
Yeah.
and they have provisions. So it's funny. It's going to be a tough thing, I think. With the people kind of letting go. It's all anxiety based. There's always triggers. The biggest one is bereavement, and I think we'll see a lot of people, because of people who've been bereaved, people who've maybe domestic abuse or whatever's been going on during lockdown is tough. I think, and as well, the point to raise would be that with people with hoarding behaviours, although it's only 6% of the population, around about 1 in 3 fire deaths is hoarding related. And I know, the Gloucestershire fire services are very, on the hoarding kind of front. Paul Barrett is someone that who's come and spoken at a lot of our training, and who's a terrific guy.
Yeah, well, I think you've nailed it on the head. When we talk about recovery from COVID, it's not just getting the economy back on track. It's a whole range of things. And I think, clearly already, I think there's going to be a mental health probably crisis. Lots of people needing support at the minute, we know. And associated behaviours such as hoarding are probably going to increase. So, I mean, it'd be good to certainly when we're a bit freer to meet and talk about that a bit more. I think we'd be delighted at the District Council. And as you say, Fire and Rescue Service, that ties in with the County Council. We've all got to make sure that we're sort of knitting together. Just sort of finally then, Paul, what's the future look like for you?
I'm not quite sure, because of budgets and things like that.
Yeah.
Because normally, we're funded by, the council, by housing associations, that kind of thing. I'd still love to do some acting. So there's a few irons in the fire there, and I think the kids somewhere along the line will probably write another comedy. I think it'll be very different from This Country. Possibly historic or something like that. So
exciting.
I would love to do something like that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, listen, you're always welcome back here, and of course we've got this fantastic facility at the Barn Theatre. So guys, I'm looking to you guys at the back. Let's get Paul in. Where's the Paul Cooper show? Come on, you've given me one. Let's make it happen. Paul, thanks very much. And as I said, if we get any questions dribbling in, we will make sure we feed those to you. Right, we're going to. I've got a question now for Paul Hodgkinson. So, Paul, you're still there. This is from Steve Jones, who I think is in Stow-on-the-Wold. Can I ask Paul why the GCC Community Hub didn't use the NHS Volunteer Responders Scheme when other groups weren't available? Or was there no other assistance available? The hub was a great idea, but there was a specific reason that can be fed back now. Is the initial... Yeah, you get the gist of the question. Sorry, just adding a bit of background. And it might be one of those things that you need to go away and answer, and we can get a response to Steve. But yeah, do you know why that was?
Well, I wasn't aware there was a problem, actually. In fact, I know that any request that went into the central community help hub then went back down to the local level, and there was a kind of real aim there to make sure that there was no overlap with what the NHS volunteers were doing. And I think, although there were a few hiccups, it generally worked all right. So I'll have to take that one away for Steve. I thought it was working okay. Clearly it wasn't working okay everywhere. In fact, if he wants to get in touch with me with any more specifics, I'm very happy to talk to him personally about that.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Andy, I'm going to pass this one to you. We did have a discussion about it earlier. Bourton on the Water, which is Paul's area. He may want to make comment on this in a second. But we had a discussion earlier, didn't we, about public toilets in particular. And we're having a discussion about them up and down the district. We're trying to balance public safety with being able to provide that service. Do you want to just sort of touch on that quickly?
Yeah, so toilets are not a thing I'm directly responsible for, but quite a lot of my portfolio overlaps with kind of health and public health side of things. I mean, the reason why lots of authorities around the country have had trouble with toilets is the general reduction in things like cleaning regimes and stuff that you've seen over not just the most recent decade, but over many, many years, means they're not necessarily being cleaned the way you would need to if you're worried about transmission of diseases like COVID, and you've got lots of people coming in and out. So one of the things that a lot of authorities, as have included, been working back to how do we change the current regime so we can deal with that, and you can open up public toilets safely without them worrying about them becoming a route for transmission. And obviously that's becoming a bigger issue now as you're seeing people going for their exercise. Is that what we shall call it?
Yes.
Sorts of more scenic locations, shall we say. So we're starting to see that in the Cotswolds because we are a scenic area. You've got people coming out. So there's a big drive on at the minute to get those kind of facilities back up and running in a way that is safe. Because your basic problem is you're talking about an enclosed space, warm, humid, water, the wind doesn't blow anything away. You've got to really be careful with that kind of environment. Otherwise, you do seriously have to worry about transmission of diseases, particularly something that at the minute we're all dealing with. So that's something we're all moving and looking at, and we talked about in terms of timescales, so we can get that up and running in those locations again.
Yeah, so I think it's particularly important on the water. We're aiming to get them open as soon as possible, hopefully start of next week. But again, it's that balance to be made. Paul, do you want to just sort of comment on that? Obviously, yesterday, I wasn't there. I was staying away. But the reports we've got is that it was very, very busy, litter everywhere, and almost as if, lockdown. What lockdown?
Yeah, I think over the weekend there was a tale of two halves, actually, if I can call it that, using a football analogy. So Saturday and Sunday, it was generally fairly quiet and no particular issues. Yesterday, the world seemed to descend on Bourton. Beautiful day, and I'm sure there'll be more days like this coming this week. So there were litter issues, but there were particular issues with the public toilets not being open. I totally hear what Andy said, that there are public health issues associated with coronavirus, so you've got to be very, very careful. But equally, clearly people are deciding to vote with their feet and go to scenic places like Bourton, and therefore it's good news that the public toilets will open relatively soon. I know I've asked you that this morning, and I gather that's going to be pretty soon now that they're going to reopen. Yeah,
and I think we want to reiterate the advice the District Council had issued last week, in that if you need a wee on your journey, don't bother coming. If you're far away enough from home that you can't get back to go for a tinkle, then stay at home, because you're unlikely to find facilities open. Certainly pubs and restaurants aren't open, so it's going to be unlikely that you're going to be able to use the loo. So by all means, come for a walk, have a look around, but big numbers of people are a no-no, and if you're travelling more than 10, 20 miles, then come on, guys, we're all in this together. And I think the big debate we're having nationally, big political debate, highlights that we all need to do our bit, and it's not fair when others don't do their bit. So come on. Great. We've got what have we got here? We've got quite a lot of people watching. Mark Haller, hello from the Costa del Siddington. I've never heard it described like that before. Got a couple of people from Fairford, a few from Northleach. Actually, Paul Cooper, you recorded this country in Northleach. What was the reception like on the whole? Most people were pretty.
Yeah, most people were really good. I think there was one lady that wasn't.
Is this the one that were coming?
Passing her car in front of the cameras, all sorts. I hate this programme, but each to his own. I mean, I'm sure that it can be annoying for people, but they were very, very patient, and we thank the people. They were lovely people, and they've been very generous to us.
And Paul, you're the county councillor for Northleach, aren't you? What's your sort of perception? Most people are perfectly happy with it. Like anywhere, there are going to be a few, but actually, I haven't really heard many negatives at all, actually.
No, I think most people love it. I mean, I do. And I was asked a couple of months ago by a national paper, so did I think it reflected real life in Northleach? Well, I said, well, it's an exaggerated Northleach, I felt, because there were things and people that I kind of recognised. Equally, there was a bit of poetic licence, but that's comedy. But I think most people think it's fine. I know some people don't like some aspects. So one couple of people in particular don't like some of the swearing. Said that to me. But there we go. It is real life in a lot of ways, isn't it? But I think it's good for Northleach. It's put it on the map, and I think most people think it's good.
Funny you mentioned swearing, because we had do you remember there was a show here at the Barn Theatre that was quite sweary, wasn't there? And I remember it caused quite a big deal in the sort of press, certainly some of the reviews. And I remember being on a panel here that you and Lewis from the Barn Theatre hosted, and we had a big discussion about swearing and whether it was, I mean, it got quite a few views on YouTube, and it was useful. But yeah, watch your language, all right? I know what you're like, Paul. But no, so good for Northleach, good for the Cotswolds, I think. And it's quite interesting seeing 40 Road, for example, in Northleach turned into this sort of like pilgrimage site now, isn't it? You see people sort of stood around, like, it's amazing. Like, what about the poor person that lives in that house, you know?
She's very, very kind to people, and
I'm
she
sure.
has people all the time.
Oh, fantastic. Actually, we've got Jenny Ford, who's one of our cabinet members, who's been on the show quite a few times. Question to you, Paul. I know you've met Jenny a few times. Is there anything in particular that we need to think about as a council in terms of coming out in support of sort of hoarders and trying to prevent it?
I think it's about kind of trying to kind of break the stigma, really, so that people come and talk. So it takes a village. Because it's also about kind of looking at the triggers and things. So maybe some bereavement counselling if someone is, there's always reasons why people are doing it. So it's about kind of awareness, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
We can certainly help with that. Fantastic. Well, folks, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the two Pauls and to Andy for being with me today. We'll be back in the next few weeks answering your questions, keeping you up to date with what's going on in the Cotswolds. Thank you very much for joining us. See you again soon. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's show. To support our programme and all the other fantastic programmes and content that the Barn Theatre produce, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below.